Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Tia's Digital Tea Time. It is 8:01. I'm running just that bit late. Oh, look at my hair. I got my glasses on. I'm a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. Tonight we're having Samyra. Oh, shoot. I'm saying this wrong. I know I'm saying her name wrong. Alexander. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right because I don't know Samyrna or... Hey, Selena. There's two ways you can pronounce this name, and my brain has forgotten how to do it. So I am going to go check real quick and see if I can find that. But other than that, tonight we're talking about her book that I'm not going to be able to pronounce either, called Malevolence, I think is how you say it. And it's this fascinating... Oh, here we go. Okay, it's coming in now. Yay! It says adding. It says adding. Oh, there it goes. It says joining. Hey!
Hey, how are
fine.
you? Okay. Oh, let me turn it this way.
There you go. You're looking beautiful.
Thank
Oh
you
my
so
goodness,
much.
I
How
love
are
your
you?
hair. Oh, it's beautiful. You look beautiful, hon. How are you?
Thank you. You know, it's back. I'm hearing the back. What is that? The background noise, but I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Let me shut off my fan so it's not so loud on my side. See if that helps a little bit. And so sorry, I'm running like a minute or two late. I was wrapping up, finishing reading your book and that shocking ending.
Oh, yeah? Okay. What do you think about it?
It was something. So I was funny. I was actually talking to Selena Michaels about it as well because, it's almost your story. We're talking about Malevolence for those of you who are watching. New release coming out here, from Miss Alexander here, and it's just amazing. A very gripping story. Now it's told in such a way that it's like this omniscient point of view that reminds me of watching like a movie, and it reminded me of those kind of movies from shocking ending. Yes, Brian, shocking ending. Hello, Kayla, thank you for joining us. It was like watching those old movies from the 90s, like this gripping drama. And I was like, okay, but it's very realistic. Like this could be, your neighbor, somebody at your church, and you have that church kind of setting going on here. And I'm not going to spoil anything. I just want to say that the themes that I got out of this story were kind of like that things don't always look as perfect as they seem. Okay. And I'm sorry, one moment. Warren! I don't know what is wrong with my dog today. Sorry. Thank you. So the theme that I got out of it was this kind of like, and I know it. I grew up, I was baptized Southern Baptist, and I was Pentecostal through my early adulthood. So I know this setting very well. Of this, the church, of this kind of very strict religious undertone, of not listening to worldly music, of not, doing things that the world, trying to be not of the world. And so it was very familiar to me. I was like, oh yeah, I remember life like this. And but I also remember that, it seemed like the higher you were, the farther the fall. And I won't lie, hand on the Bible, I had one of the assistant pastors, married with like 5 kids, used to hit on me all the time. I am not lying. It was like that. It was like that because I feel like the higher the pedestal, the higher that, that further that fall went, the further that fall is sin. And that kind of belief that the devil made me do it, so therefore we can work around it, or it's acceptable in some form or fashion, versus this kind of personal responsibility that you get when you're not necessarily aligned with a fundamental religion. And I was like, wow. But that is the theme I got out of that, is that things aren't as perfect as they seem. You have that front that you show, and then what's really happening in the background. And that there is always this kind of secret life that people don't always know about, and the need to keep the facade going. And I was always a black sheep in my church. I always
Oh
was.
yeah.
I was, because I was like 19, 20, 20 when I was in the military, at least in the Pentecostal Church God Pentecostal kind of thing. And there were certain things that, because we were military, were acceptable. I wore pants, makeup, whatever. But I remember things that didn't really occur to me at the time, like going in and having one of the ladies tell me that that my dress was too hiked up in the back, because I wasn't shaped like most Caucasian women. I have a rounder. And so, and how careful I had to be. And I was, couldn't, cause my brothers to sin in church by showing
right
stuff like that. I remember this very, very much like this culture of personal responsibility to the other people in your congregation. So, but what inspired you to write this book?
You know what? I did not grow up in the church, but when I turned 21, I got what I used to call at the time saved. So I started going to church all the time, about 4 times a week, and I don't regret any of that. I still believe in God, and I still have my faith, but I no longer believe that I need to like go to church 4 or 5 times a week to be good with God. I don't believe it's performance based. So, and even though I'm thankful for that life, that I learned a lot there. Discipline, fasting, praying, a lot of stuff, faith that I didn't have before. But then, of course, so I was able to take what I knew from that, even though I was an adult. My character, Janet, she's 9 years old. And I imagine putting her in that place and the pressure that would be upon her, because not only is her father a deacon at that church, he's trying to become the assistant pastor. Yeah. So I remember how some people could be critical and always looking at you. And especially if you are higher up in the church, it's a lot of pressure. So I'm like, what would it be for a girl to be so energetic and outgoing as she is, to have that extra scrutiny now come upon her, in her family?
Yeah.
So I just took a lot of stuff that I've seen, stuff that people said to me as an adult, and I sort of like, I forget the guy who wrote the Left Behind series. He says one of the good things of good storytelling is you throw your character up a tree and you start throwing apples and stuff at them, and you make life hard. So I said, what would Janet do if I throw all this kind of stuff that I things that I faced as an adult to her at 9? How can she fight her way to come out of this? What would happen to her in these situations? Yeah. That's one way I came up with it. Like, I didn't have a strict outline. The story was really supposed to go somewhere else, but as I started typing, they started saying different stuff. Yeah. So I let them go, because that story was supposed to be, Janet was supposed to get older. You were going to see her at least about 19. But then I started loving her so much at 9. I said, I don't want to take her from being 9. I freaking love this little girl at 9. Yeah. Yeah. And I kept it there because I was asking people questions, other authors, and online researching, how can I make this story be okay and zoom her to 19? And I found someone who told me online. But then after I thought about it, I was like, nah, Janet is just my everything. I said, this little girl, I love her. I didn't base her on anybody. So to see this little girl, I'm like, where did she come from in my psyche? And I'm like, but I'm keeping this little girl 9 years old because she is everything.
Now, it was interesting because there was certain cultural references to the time period, you know, there you mentioned, for example, a telephone booth. You mentioned salt and pepper, push it. You mentioned certain things that I know happened in the 80s and maybe early 90s, but mostly late 80s, early 90s is what I was reading here. And was that like, is that your childhood? Is that where you pulled that from, this kind of time frame? Or did you feel like it was maybe something that's, you know, a different culture of trying to catch somebody doing the kind of things that were happening in this story without the age of internet there to help you?
I think that's a great question. For 1987, I did it because I wanted to capture my time back in the Midwest in Gary, Indiana. So for me, I knew I would have had to done a lot of research if I would have taken it to a different time. But I said I wanted to pay respect back to my city, especially because I hadn't been there a long time. So I was like, you know what, to actually do the greatest job I can do, I knew 1987. I was there. And I said, I know what it was like to be a little girl at that age. So that's why I put it there. And like, I was big into dance at the time and music myself at that age. So I knew the songs, but you know, I did have to research what were the popular dances in the songs, because I can't remember, like you said, was it the late 80s? Was it the early 90s? So I had to go and look. Like the Pleasure Principle is mentioned in there. That was 1987. Then I had to look. Janet was in the summertime. So was the Pleasure Principle in the late 80s. So I wanted to make sure I was right. So that part of the things I did have to do the research on. But also, as you know, the story does take a darker side. This is why I say this is not a kid story. No. This story has trigger warnings of corporal punishment. Also, what else? Child kidnapping, child murder without graphics. So if you're thinking that this is going to be a little fluffy story because the little girl is on there, please don't get it messed up.
No, but I feel like the title really covers that kind of malevolent, you know, this theme. And also this kind of almost, no dub-con, no non-con, nothing like that. The corporal punishment really has to do with discipline in the household as known in the 80s and 90s. And those of us who were there remember spanking and belting and whipping and switches and all those kind of different things that kids really don't see as much anymore these days, because we as a society have kind of moved away from that kind of punishment to discipline children. But it was a very real, I remember watching my principal spank somebody when I was in elementary school. Like, you know, for those of you who might be millennials here or Gen Z, you guys don't know. You don't know unless you were there. You had to be there to know what this was like. But if you read this book, you'll kind of get a little taste of it. And that experience was very realistic. And it's interesting because, you know, as an author myself who writes like domestic discipline and BDSM and stuff, it's really a whole different kind of discipline. It's almost very humiliating, where, you know, to me, and I remember this, I remember someone, oh my goodness, this was in my church. He was telling me how he disciplines his kids, where like, and he was still whipping the kids who were like 14, 15 with belts and stuff when they misbehaved. And he said, yes, we as a family get together, we pray together, then I sit down on the bed and he puts himself over my lap and then I hit him with a belt. And I was like, you know, because I was like 21, I'm like, or 20, I'm like, you know, I'm thinking he's 15, you know what I mean? But that was a very real culture, especially, you know, in certain ethnic minorities, be it African-American, Hispanic, Asian, especially, and actually the guy I was talking about was African-American. It was just like that. And I think people don't realize that as much, you know, because it's so different now. Now, when you hear about it, it's shocking. And when you're like, oh my God, your mom or dad hit you with a belt, call the police, right? That's what we do.
Not back in that day. But I did want to answer. Someone in the chat said where to get the book. So it's Road to Malevolence by Samyra Alexander. That's Samyra Alexander. You can find it on Amazon. It's in ebook and also in paperback form. So, but yeah, you made a good point there. I mean, it was the norm, you know, that it was just what happened. I think every school I went to, even up into high school senior year, and I graduated in 97, and they were still like hitting people.
Yeah. So, I graduated in 97 too. I think they stopped hitting people in like middle school and that, but yeah, like I remember a teacher once coming up to me and like hitting me in the back of the head. Like they did shit like that. Like in 5th grade, they did shit like that. And, but it was this different culture. But I think it really reflects your experience of being there, because having been there myself, because we're the same age, I was like being there again. I was like, oh, the dancing in the street, like in the, you know, in the front when your friends are there and you had your radio and that, all that, the everything. I was just like, oh my goodness, this I know this story. I've been there.
I'm happy you said that, because I had a beta reader, right? And this was a paid beta reader. And she said, I know Janet is in the church, or at least her family is very churchy, but Janet is still seeing the world. And she's like, you need to capture more of the world. And I'm like, I mentioned she saw somebody with a mohawk. I mentioned her family has Jerry curls. I'm like, I mentioned this and this. I mentioned culottes. I'm like, how much more am I going to put in the story? I mean, like,
but you know what? First of all, if you ever need beta readers, definitely don't pay people. Come to my group. We'll find you some beta readers. You know?
You do that? Because
yes,
people
will beta read for free. You do not have to pay beta readers these days. Okay. There's a lot of people who'll do it just for a free copy of a book.
Okay, you know? Cool.
So definitely hit me up on your next book, and we'll look for them in my chat or my group. And we, you know, Selena's in here. I'm sure she'll let you look in her group. Darnella, who's admin in Dakari's Pen is Lethal. You know, they write street lit. Darnella is actually a little older than us. Darnella, you would like this story. You would know this world as well. You would know. Like I was already happy the moment you said she was dancing in front of the altar like she was Salt and Pepper doing push it, and I saw it in my head, because I know exactly what.
Do you remember which one of it? I remember being I remember being a little kid seeing that video, and one of them did that thing with their hand and went back and then started pumping, and I was like, oh my God, yes. I love them.
I remember that video. Church. I remember how, and in that, even in that time, they were considered quite like a worldly group. They were shocking. You know, they had come out. They were very scandalous, because not only were they rapped very heavy on like intimacy and sex, and they were sexy themselves, and they were powerful women, and and very confident, and like you said, would do the dance, and it was I knew exactly what I thought in my head. I was like, oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. In the 80s, I mean, like I said, I used to have a best friend at the time, and we would go outside to dance, and I couldn't dance naturally, but I was able at the time to catch up on the dances, and she would teach me. So music and dance was such a big part of my life. That's why I wanted Janet to do it, because for me, it was like paying respect to some of the artists and the dances and the song. And I'm from Gary, Indiana, and you know the Jacksons are from there. So I said, if she's going to dance to anybody, she's dancing to Janet Jackson. Thank you so much. Somebody was saying, I love your earrings. Thank you, Ryan. But yeah, so I was like, and she mentions, I'm from Gary, Indiana, and I'm going to be the next Michael Jackson. She was going off on the church mother, Mother Reese, bless Mother Reese soul, you know. So now, I was like, I wanted to put my city in it as well as the time frame.
And for those of you who don't know, that's often the pastor's wife carries the title of mother usually in those traditional churches like that, because we had one as well. We used to have to call her by her last name. Mother Beavers was mine, right, in the Pentecostal church. So yeah, it was like that. I remember honestly. So if anything, read it for just the cultural reminder of life. And this kind of, you know, being told from a 9-year-old's point of view,
Right.
And you know, I see you throw in things that she's just kind of like, I don't understand what the problem is. Don't they want me to be like a good dancer, and not understanding the politics behind like church life. And the politics is very strong in the traditional fundamental churches like that.
Yeah.
You know, where everybody's watching you and your behavior, and you're accountable to everybody in the congregation. And you know, even down to Janet's father, you know, having to account for the things that he's done. Very good. Like I said, guys, it's an easy read, told an omniscient point of view, so you know everything and every, you know, at least it's not really, but it is in a way. It's Janet's point of view, but she's really
Right.
letting you know everything that's happening. Like she's telling you everything. So it really is first person, but it's kind of omniscient in a way. First person omniscient, maybe a little bit. I don't know. It's not, but
Yeah.
it is. It is to
Yeah.
me, and I think it's because she shares so much of what's happening, you know, and how I mentioned this to Selena too, because you know, she throws out at certain points it's my father, and at other points it's Tremaine, you know, as the name. And I thought that was really an interesting choice of her shifting between the names of her parents and calling them by their parental titles. And so I was curious, was that something that, does that mean something, or was it just kind of like, oh, clarification, just to be clear?
No, the reason I did that, because I had betas on this one. I had a few betas for this one. And at first I just kept saying her mother, her father, and when her brother was there, Benji, I would say their parents, their parents. And several betas kept saying, oh no, this is just too overwhelming. Every line, her mother, their father, their mother, please use their names. And at first I kept going back to just, you know, her parents, their parents. And then I had gotten another crew of betas, and they were like, this is confusing. It's taking us out the story. You got to say her parents' name. So I looked at it. Even one editor told me to just stick to her parents. She's 9. She's not calling her parents by their name.
Exactly.
That
I
tallied it up, though.
I would have given.
I tallied it up, and of my list of beta readers, the majority has said it was taking them out. It was just too much. Her parents, their parents, her father. They're like, no, call these people by their names. They're like, they have a big role in the story. We're forgetting the names. They're like, I didn't remember the mother's name to the end of the book. So
now, all right. So
I
know we have a number of authors in the watching. If you're watching this, let us know what you think about this. This is why I used the word omniscient, because she was calling them by their names, and that to me that was kind of like a story.
Third person limited omniscient.
Yeah, like a narrative. Yeah, like a narrative, like a narrator telling, you know, like, well, Tremaine did this and Natalie did that, and you know, this kind of thing versus, okay, my mother and my father, or her father or her mother or their mother, their, you know, that's right, it wasn't first, it was third. Sorry, it felt like first person, I think, because her internal dialogue was so rich. You know, don't worry guys, it's not confusing. She's got it italicized. So you'll know when it's internal dialogue, and it will shift into that. I don't get why they're upset, you know, that kind of thing. Well, they say, but those of you who are in there, let me know what you guys think. You know, should have been mother, father, in your opinion. As authors, do you do it, or do you move into names if you think it's too much? I'm just curious what people did, because I would have told you to stick with mother, father too. And like you said, your editor did as well. And, you know, I have a background as an editor as well. So, but I'm curious because, you know, in the end, it's the readers that we have to impress, right? Not the editor. So,
and that's why I didn't go with the editor, you know, even though I went, you know, some other things that she said, but it was so many of the betas who said that, and they kept on saying that, you know, this is a good story, but that is the only thing that's bringing me out of it. And that's why I decided. But I did actually hit up some authors that I'm friends with when I was typing it, because I kept getting so many different points. I DM'd the authors that I knew, and I'm like, hey, what would you do? What would you use?
Yeah.
So,
it is.
You know, I had some that it was split. It was even split. So, and then I had one that I knew. She goes by the name of Miss Panther Jones. We grew up together. She's an awesome urban fiction reader. She hasn't put out anything in a while, but she's putting out something soon. So again, that's Miss Panther Jones. But she told me, what feels right to you when you think about it? What do you want to do? Because at the end of the day, this is your story. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? I'm comfortable with mixing it up. And I said, I'm going to just stir it out and I'm going to go with it just like that.
Yeah. Ryan writes, depends. The more deep in the POV I give the characters the names the first person narrator would use, such as calling mom or dad, or if the character knows each other by nickname, I would use the nickname. Yeah, see, she's right. So it's told in, like you said, third person limited, kind of on this, and you're listening in. But she does talk to the reader in a narrative kind of first person thought process, like, hey, this is what's going on in my head.
Yeah, because it's also psychological fiction. So
yeah.
I like to bring that piece in,
yeah.
that they're saying like what's going on in the head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of in a like a first person kind of like, but it, like I said, it's in italics. You can't miss it. It's not going to be like,
Right.
wait, I don't know what's happening. It's a very easy shift into that frame of thought. The characters were, like I said, very rich. I found it, like I said, very realistic. You know, your villains, if you will, depending on how you want to look at the characters and that, but we'll just call them the antagonist, I guess, the villain.
Right.
Here, you know, is fairly even killed. Like, you know, he's, he's done bad things, you know, but even in the raising, you know, he's not necessarily cruel, you know what I mean? This isn't locking people in cages villainous, you know what I mean? It's a very real life. It kind of, like I said, I was telling Selena, it reminds me of those older like 80s 90s aughts urban kind of storylines that you used to find, you know, like these kind of cultural family dynamics. And so if you enjoyed those kind of shows, like almost kind of it's even richer and grittier than, say, like Lifetime movies and stuff, but it has that kind of drama of you know, and like you said, psychological thriller in that way. So, you know what, Ryan, I think you'll like this story. You know, of course, as we always say, heed the trigger warnings for anybody who reads it, only because there are some elements that people will find disturbing if you're not prepared for them. That's great that you did it, because a lot of psychological thriller type authors won't bother, because it's kind of like, well, you're picking it up, so you should know.
Oh, you mean to put it in? You know what? And I actually didn't put it under psychological thriller, though. I just put it under just plain women's psychological fiction, because I wasn't sure. Like, I was doing the research and I was like, I don't know if I can say if it's a thriller. I did put, you know, one of the areas of the subgenres as far as suspense, because I did think it was the suspense there. But yeah, I did want to put those warnings in there because I didn't want to surprise anybody. And I think by looking at the little girl on the cover, I didn't want people to think that they were about to pick up this really sweet book.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Jenny can be sweet, but she's not all that sweet.
No. And it's kind of interesting, too. And there was also, you know, I felt like you also addressed some of mental health issues in the story with her mother. And so those of us who deal with mental illness will definitely be able to, even though you don't come out necessarily and say exactly what it is she has, you'll recognize it. I recognize it as bipolar disorder. To me, it's maybe a touch of schizophrenia there, but like this kind of family dynamic that's not always easy when you deal with people who have, you know, those kind of things as well. So, like, yes, all the cult. So anybody who does deal with like that stuff, be warned, it's also in there along with the other things mentioned. So
right, and I wanted to just mention the trigger warnings again. Somebody did ask what those were. So the trigger warnings is corporal punishment, the spankings. Then there's also child kidnapping, and also child murder, but without the graphics.
Yeah. So, it's really not any more graphic than if you watched America's Most Wanted. It has that kind of, in my opinion, that kind of level of detail, if even that, of this kind of, the murder aspect, I mean, and kidnapping aspect. So, you're not, you didn't go into gory details or nothing like that. You just kind of kept it to what's almost kind of like police fact, like kind of just like, okay, well, this,
Exactly.
So I feel like you would be okay with it in that way, Ryan, but it's still disturbing all the same because, anything that has to deal with abuse, child kidnapping, child murder, things happening in the neighborhood, whatever it is like that is, triggering to some people because you never know. It always reminds me, there was, like in the 70s and 80s, like we watch those movies now where like the kids end up kidnapped and killed or whatever, we watch them and I find them more disturbing the older I get. So, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if as we age, we become more aware of mortality or the snuffing of life too fast, or, I just find as I get older, I'm more sensitive to it. So I don't watch all those movies like, oh my goodness, there was one that's based off like famous, like something bone. Oh, anyway, but yeah, it's that, that kind of stuff. I think people, if you like, if you want African American, like, yes, suspense and fiction, I think this is, like I said, a great cultural reference. I feel like well represented. You had more than just, African Americans in there. You brought in also Hispanic, or I took as Hispanic. Maybe it wasn't Hispanic. Was Yolanda Hispanic?
Yolanda? No, Yolanda was actually Black.
Was she? Oh my God, I took her as Hispanic. I don't know why.
What about it made you think she was Hispanic, though? I'd like to know.
I don't know. I think it was the way maybe she described her hair and stuff when they were in the.
I'm going to tell you what I was trying to describe with that hair. I was trying to make it, if you remember, like if you think Salt and Pepper, and even in the video Push It, how they had, like, I think it was longer on this side, maybe cut shorter here, and all this was maybe shaved.
Oh yeah.
And it was like you had like the part here and maybe the blonde curls coming this way, and this was maybe going back that way. I was trying to describe it that way. I did my best. I think I said she had it shaved in the back on the side.
It doesn't detract from the story either way, no matter, because I don't describe all my characters for that reason, because I let people decide in some ways how they're gonna look. Or what their ethnicity may or may not be. So for some reason I pictured her as Hispanic, but that but like I said, it didn't change anything. That if I read it again and picture her as African American, it wouldn't change how I felt about it, because her characterization is not really what she looks like as much as what she represents to your protagonist. Her representation in the life of this 9-year-old. So she could have looked like anything. She could have been Asian. She could have been. It wouldn't have mattered, because of how she her representation is stronger than what she looks like. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I found this also, and maybe this is just me and this kind of sense, as we see the world, through the eyes of other like races and what we call like the privilege of certain ethnicities and that. But I noticed also that when the one kid went missing, an African American kid, that there wasn't the same uproar as what I mean, you get. And I don't know if I'm more sensitive to it because I just read a whole news about this, and I forgot what it was Elizabeth Smart, how another girl had gone missing at the same time, but she was African American and she didn't get near the news coverage, near the amount of people to help search, near, you know what I mean? And so I don't know if
Right.
that's just media influencing my viewpoint of this story, but it felt like that as I was reading it, because, you know, you fast forward like a year, you know, later, and it's kind of like milk carton.
So,
Yeah.
so the reason I did that, and I want to ask that too. So, I'm going to answer your question. I also want to answer. Someone asked, why did I choose a 9-year-old MC? I chose a 9-year-old MC because the story was supposed to be a little bit different. She was supposed to grow older,
Yeah.
but I wanted to start her at 9 because that was when I grew up. And so I wanted to be about that age, because one thing, I didn't want to make her younger because I was scared to try to write for a 6-year-old. I put myself out there to write in the voice of a 9-year-old. And the whole time I was saying to myself, oh my God, Samyra, are you talking like an adult, or are you staying with a 9? So anything younger, that was just me. Because I'm like, I know good and well I probably can't write 5 or 6-year-old. 9, I can probably pull that off. And I did a good job, if I can say so myself, with pulling off 9 years old. So that's what that was about. And like I said, she was going to be older, and you were going to see her, what happened to her at 9 to make her who she was older.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
So that's what that was about. But yeah, to answer your question though, Tia, it's starting to what is that feedback.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, the reason I decided to go, I'm sorry, I forgot, what was your question?
Oh, nothing. I was just kind of making an observation that
I know, I remember.
Yeah.
Because what is the name of that show with John? Is it John Walsh? The kidnapping kids. I used to remember his son went missing in real life.
Yeah, that was
America's
like
Most Wanted.
yes. Oh my goodness. And yes. My goodness.
Yeah, that was it. America's Most Wanted.
Yeah, like kind of.
And there was a lot of coverage, and if I remember correctly, it was maybe more white kids.
Yeah.
On there. And then not just that, if you remember back then, it was this big thing about kids being kidnapped, and the parents were like, oh my God, you got to be careful, watch yourself, people are still kidnapping kids. I grew up on the time when who was that? Alton Coleman. He was real big in the Midwest.
Yeah.
You know, him and his girlfriend Deborah, and they had killed some kids, and they were actually kidnapping kids.
Yeah.
Before they were caught. And so it was a big thing about being safe. And I remember hearing my friends' parents mention, oh, well, if it was a white kid that had gotten kidnapped, there would have been more coverage. And I used to hear that a lot. And then not just those messages, but even when I would watch TV, I would notice that it was a difference. Like I would be like, oh, wow, if they did show a black person, it was like they flashed the what's her face is missing. That's it. But then if it was someone white, it used to seem like it was a lot more play about that.
Yeah.
A lot of you know, even a month or so go by, and I'm like, well, they don't show Keisha anymore, but we keep seeing Lindsay.
Yeah. No, and it was because, you know, looking at it from the perspective now, you know, I am Hispanic, but, you know, as you can see, my dad was from Norway. So, you know, I've had the Caucasian experience. And I would have thought growing up that there weren't as many missing black people. Seriously. Because all the coverage was on white people. No, I'm serious. I would have thought there wasn't as many kidnappings in that community as there are in the white community. I felt like the media, the way the coverage is. If you would have asked me at 10 years old or 12 years old, well, when you see kids missing on TV, who are they? I would have been like, oh, they're all like, I don't know, people in suburban white. You know, I would have thought that because they didn't get the coverage. And, you know, that's a very innocent perception of my time in the 80s and 90s. So, you know, it is like that. And I felt like it even felt that way as we, like I said, as we fast forward a year later, and it's kind of like, oh, well, moving on, versus this.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting too, because it also influences the life that obviously Janet is going to have,
Right.
because, I don't want to give spoilers of how that plays out, but if you hit me up, I'll tell you why I think that. I'll tell you why I think that. Because had Janet been white, Janet been white, there would have been a lot more scrutiny and stuff there, I feel like,
right,
for that time frame. And I like to think that our world is getting more getting better at it as we come to acknowledge these things, like, hey, why is it this way? Why is, but it's a good reflection of the 80s, because it was that's right. I do remember that, because her mom, like, and then Elizabeth Smart was all over the news. Yeah, it was like that. And I hate to say it, it's because she was blonde and blue-eyed. I just, let's be honest, I don't even know she would have gotten that much covered had she been a brunette. But you know who else it was like that too? Was that little girl, John Bonet. Same thing.
John Bonet.
Yeah. John Bonet, remember? Blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful little girl. I think she was blue-eyed. If not, she seemed like blue-eyed.
People are still talking about John Bonet Ramsey to this day, okay?
Yes,
the whole family is dead, I think. Maybe except, what, is the brother the only one alive?
Yep, and they're still talking about it. They're still investigating it. They are still investigating it. They were talking about, what was it, like something they just found more evidence, some kind of evidence or whatever, and that just came up like 3 days ago. Yeah.
Right.
But between her disappearance and, now there's probably been 300,000 missing kids. No, he talks about them though, It's just a sad reality of media and TV, and how they're like, you know what I mean, of this present people will care, more about this and not as much about this, and people work harder for this child but not maybe as hard, I'm like that. I hope it changes now. But you know what, when that girl went missing just recently, whose boyfriend killed her, you remember, they were in the van or whatever, right? And I couldn't
go to the gym without seeing her face.
Right. But they were talking about the 11 other people who went missing during that period that got no coverage. And one was like African-American, one was Asian, but the blonde hair, blue-eyed girl got all the coverage, and nobody talked about, the other missing people. And so it is culturally something wrong. Like, our society is media wise, the people, I don't know if it's the people running media, if it's the people, you know what I mean, or they're like, well, nobody stays tuned if it's not, let's see here. Classmates in my shanty was murdered. Her body's found in a train yard after missing for 3 to 5 days. No one's know what happened to her. She was albino, and that was in the night. Oh yeah, Native American women go missing and no one talks about them. That's true. Yes, the case went cold. Yeah, but John Bonet, she's still being talked about. Yep, like you said, the whole family's dead. People still care. Why? Why do they care? What made her different from the other 300,000 kids? Yeah.
You can go on to YouTube right now and find something about John Bonet, because when I was doing my research into this, I even went to look up John Bonet's name, and you will find stuff somebody probably created this month or last month. Who killed John Bonet?
Yeah. Like it's still like this cultural phenomena, but and it is like that. So I found this kind of interesting that here we are in, like you said, 1987 in your story, and then we have this child, kidnapping, murder featured in the story, and you know what I mean, and the way that I feel like the neighborhood, like the way it kind of plays out, like, okay, well, it's been a year, we're not going to hold out anymore hope. We're not gonna, you know what I mean, the way people held out hope for some of these other kids, like, oh, I'm not right. I'm not having a funeral. I'm not this. I'm not that. This is, you know, people are still looking. People are still care. People will, you know, when the student made about what stories they run, they're made by white men. That changed. Until that changes, that won't coverage. There you go, Jenny. Oh.
Yeah, and you know, another thing with that too is like, I'm sure you all know that the Atlanta child murders, and even though I think that happened in the late 70s, when I grew up, I don't know why I was allowed to watch certain stuff on TV.
Yeah.
But I would watch stuff about that, and it just really shocked me and intrigued me, like who was killing all these Black kids. And so not only did I get to see that, then like I said about learning about Alton Coleman, he was active. And my mother told me at the time, she knew I was scared and said he was coming to get me because he was in Gary. So that stuff freaked me out and stayed with me. And I think that's where it came from. In the book, trying to figure out, like, that was a big time where a lot of kids were missing, or either they just started covering it. And remember, like, the milk cartons.
Yes.
That was big back then. I remember that, going to get milk, pouring milk, and the freaking dead kid, like, you pouring your milk, this is my green drink, and somebody dead little kid on you. Like, what the? I'm a little kid, like, oh my God, somebody kidnapped this one, they could kidnap me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, if they're on the milk carton, you might as well consider them dead, because once they reach that stage, that means they've been missing however long. And yeah, it's hard. Like I said, there was just so much rich cultural references in your story. I appreciate it also getting it, you know, the African American experience from it, you know, the 80s. Like I said, I remember it, but I remember it from a different viewpoint. So it was nice to, but some things are common no matter what, your ethnicity or race or whatever, like dancing out with your friends on, you know, or using a payphone booth, because we, you know, don't even see those anymore.
I'm going to have to find my charger, but the reason I didn't put many other cultures in it, because growing up in Gary, Indiana, it was basically all Black in my city. You know, I would like to say maybe over 90% Black. Yeah. The only time I really got a chance to interact with anybody that was different than my ethnicity, if we went to the suburbs around us. Like, my mother worked in the steel mill, and so she worked around a lot of white people, and sometimes we would go visit them. She had a white best friend, but it was only a few times a year. Yeah. So it was really just Black everything. We had a few Hispanic people that went to school with us, you know, but other than that, it was just us. Yeah. Every now and again, a white person would come to our school, but it would be like one. And it was always like a white boy. Like, I remember in middle school, it was this one white boy, and his name was Doug. You know, in high school, one white boy, and he stayed for maybe a year. Then they were gone, you know?
Yeah. I grew up in Florida, so there was a little bit more cultural integration here, because the nature of Florida, you know, with especially the Hispanic influence and coming out of the Caribbean, you know, whether you were Cuban, Puerto Rican, Haitian, you know, from Bermuda, so you know what I mean? Florida was very much that melting pot like that. But, you know, it never really, because like I said, you know, unless your racism is often taught. So like, I had a great best friend. My best friend her name was Pamela. She was African American, but you know, it never really occurred to me that when she come to visit me, that there were no other Black kids in my neighborhood. She was it. No. That was it. You know, like at that age, you don't make those connections like you do when you're older. You know, I was like 10. I saw pictures of, like, you know, and I always, it never really, you know, but it was very still integrated neighborhood wise. Was still very integrated, or I'm sorry, segregated culturally. Like, I think people just, you know, didn't in the 80s yet. You know, it was getting better. But
hey, I'm sorry to cut you off. My charger is like right around that corner. I'm gonna run and grab it for this phone.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to thank everybody while she's getting her charger. Everybody who's tuned in today to talk about this story. Definitely read it. It's very rich, with the drama and the suspense and the cultural references of the 80s, and also of that religious culture that, unless if you didn't grow up in it, it might be shocking to you, but it was very much like that. I know it because I was in it. In the 80s or 90s, I remember I was like, that was Baptist, Southern Baptist.
Right.
And I was Pentecostal for a while, Southern Baptist and Pentecostal. So it very much was like that. So everything there, down to them monitoring your behavior and how you act, and how strict they were with children, and kind of keeping them from having fun, worldly fun, like dancing to Salt and Pepper, like that was not,
Right.
So I very much enjoyed your book, and I'm so glad to have you on tonight and to read it. I know we're about 8 minutes from our hour. What do you want readers to know about this story?
You know what? I think this would be a good story for anyone if you grew up in the church, like you said, Pentecostal, apostolic. And even if you didn't grow up in it, this will give you an understanding maybe of a world that you don't know that exists, because I think it goes deep into the thinking of her parents, and how they're wanting her to be like her brother. Benji follows more of his parents. That's her 12-year-old brother, Janet's 12-year-old brother. He's in church. He's in the choir. He's making them look good, as a family, but not Janet. She can't be that. She's naturally just boisterous. She's nosy, she's outspoken, she just is really out there, and she's not like them. And it's just seeing how they're wanting to put that lifestyle on her, and she's rebelling against it. But it also deals with infidelity and what a family's life, how it turns out when adultery comes into the scene. And Janet has to face a lot of things for her age, and she makes some very poor choices. Like, you'll maybe love her in the beginning, then may start looking at her a bit differently going towards the end, because she doesn't make the best choices. But one thing I'm going to say about her, either you're going to love her at the end or you're going to hate her, and either way she don't care, because some neighbors were saying to me, like, oh my God, I don't know how people are going to think. And I just kept thinking to myself, Janet don't care. She don't care what they think. Janet is just freaking raw.
I didn't hate her at the end of the book, because I'm also remind yourself that maybe it's because I'm older, but we are looking at the world through the eyes of a 9-year-old. And so how they perceive difficulties and how they deal with those difficulties, and the way they was in line with her age. You know what I mean? It's never, like you said, bad decisions. Kids don't always make good decisions. It's why they have parents, and to try to help them with that. But when things go wrong, or you don't always have that help, or things, parents, life happens and parents get distracted, parents get ill, parents, whatever, parents separate. There's sometimes, that, kids can rebel in pain, and how they rebel in pain might not necessarily be, the best way to handle that situation. But I felt like it was authentic. So I didn't hate her. It was authentic. It was sad. Things are very sad in the story at the end in that way, but it was authentic and very real. And that's all you can. Hi, Theodore. That's all you can. You tell the story the best you can, the way it needs to be told. So that's all you can.
One thing I want to say, what I was going for at the end, like, I'm a big lover of Alfred Hitchcock, and of like the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the Twilight Zones, the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, where it always has these funny, like, kind of twists at the end. And that's what I was going for at the end, because I was like, I wanted to do something that, because people were like, this person has to pay, they have to pay. And I was like, okay, it's going to pay. I'm going to let this person pay, but not in the way you think. it's going to be traumatic, but you may not see it. You may not get it. But this person is definitely paying.
I think there's something to be said about less is more in these cases, because that's what Alfred Hitchcock was known for. Is these kind of like, you close the book and you have to think about it. Well, you know the natural course of where this is going based. If you read the book carefully enough and you know the characters well enough, you already know what's, even at the end of the book, how that played out, what happened later. You can almost imagine it. You're like, well, this character probably did this, and this character did this, and this character did this, and you know. And I think it's kind of like this, you know, here, and also this kind of maybe almost like a case study into how we perceive when things happen when you're young. Like, I think about, like, a matter of fact, I was just talking recently about a friend of mine whose little brother shot himself in the foot. And this was in the 90s. And what came of that? And you know, how his parents got in trouble because of the gun that was, you know what I mean? All this, that fallout of that. And I wondered for him, you know, does he look back at that and does he feel guilt for that? Did it influence how his path unfolded before him afterwards? Did it, you know what I mean? Or was it, you know, at that age, do you bounce back easier? You know, I guess it's really about children trauma responses in that way. And I know in your line of work, for those of you who don't know, are you still working at the women's shelter?
At the domestic violence shelter.
Yeah. So you see children, traumatized children often, then I imagine, come in and out of your door. So
the majority of my clients are traumatized kids.
All right. So you see that kind of like a trauma response, and I imagine every kid deals with it differently on some level, because we are all different people. But, you know, do you see, I imagine, like, do you look and you're like, this kid is on this path, or this kid will do this, or this kid will overcome, this kid will succumb, this, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you almost hope for everybody to get the best, but I imagine you see it, like you said, traumatized kids, and you're like, oh, you know, where's their path going? That's amazing. You are an amazing person to work at this place. Brave.
Thank you.
Amazing. I know what you do, and we had talked about it. Guys, I have another interview from previous books. Definitely check them out from last year. Go look at those interviews. We talk about her work at the Battered Women's Shelter. You know, and what you do for those women and children is amazing. And I feel like your story reflects also that kind of experience in a way too. You know, even though there wasn't like battered women necessarily in the story, but the trauma responses, I feel like, authentic, in my opinion, you know.
Right.
So thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you, Selena.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. I see the thank yous.
Right.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you, Kike. Thank you. Yep, I'm going down the list. Guys, if you have any questions, hit us up in the comments. Check it out, Road to Malevolence. Do I say that?
Oh, what's
See, you know, I can't always pronounce words.
Yeah.
Okay. Link is in there, and feel free to post a link also on my group, like separate from here, so that everybody can see it. Samyra, and thank you again for everything.
Yeah, Malevolence.
All right, guys.
Yes, the name of it is Road to Malevolence by Samyra Alexander, and you can find it on Amazon.
All right.
Yeah, somebody did ask where I'm from. I live in California, in Los Angeles area, but I'm from Gary, Indiana.
And like I said, homage, and this is set in Gary, Indiana. So.
Exactly.
All right. So thank you so much. We're at 9 o'clock. All right. I love you guys. I'll see you all in the comments.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you.